Welcome back to STEAM Spark, Think STEAM Career Podcast. This is where we talk about STEAM careers and the benefit of STEAM to our BIPOC community. We are going to be talking about decolonizing the algorithm. We're going to focus on Justice AI GPT and the future of ethical intelligence. We're going to explore the intersection of science, culture, and justice, and reimagining innovation as a pathway to ancestral wisdom and global equity. Today's episode is not just about artificial intelligence, it's about power. We are in the information age, a lot of data, and how you use that, especially as it pertains to the BIPOC community and women. It's very critical. It's about authorship. It's about what happened when someone dares to say, we have solved the AI bias problem. The BIPOC community, the Black, the people of color, the women, we know how bias affect each and every one of us. In the AI age, this conversation is most urgent and most critical. This is why we are going to be talking with none other than Christian Ortiz.
Hello, and thank
Christian is a tech activist, epistemic architect, the founder of Justice AI. Have you heard of Justice AI? This should be an equal level with OpenAI, in my view. So we have to lift him up because it's important for our community. He's here to talk about Justice AI GPT, a framework built on DIA model. What is DIA model? This is the Decolonial Intelligence Architect. That's challenging everything we are taught, we have been taught, or what we know about ethical AI. Christian, is there anything else you want to add?
No, sir, you knocked it out of the park. I am beyond grateful and thank you for opening your platform.
Excellent. Thank you, Christian. Let's start with the headline. You have said Justice AI GPT has solved the AI bias problem. That's a bold claim. What does solve means in your framework, and why do you think the mainstream AI world resist that conclusion?
In my framework, solve doesn't mean I've eliminated prejudice from society. That's impossible. However, it does mean I've built an AI architecture that detects, deconstructs, and corrects bias at its root cause, epistemic inequality. When we talk about AI and bias, AI is simply a reflection of all of societal bias. It is programmed through all Western data. And what we've been able to do is identify the root cause of bias, which is colonial. It's the system of colonial white supremacy we've inherited through education, how we were conditioned to see each other, and how we conditioned to understand each other globally. We are conditioned by these biases. And so as AI came to fruition, I immediately understood its power and I immediately recognized the bias within. And of course, the immediate question for me was, how do I build a system that doesn't regurgitate the same harmful biases? When we talk about data, Justice AI uses the DIA framework. It's the Decolonial Intelligence Algorithmic framework to strip out Eurocentric defaults in mainstream models, centering knowledge in the global majority, indigenous science, and marginalized communities. Mainstream AI resists this because it's not just technical, it's political. Our biases are political globally. To acknowledge the solution is to admit the problem was never just statistical noise. It was that the system of white supremacy is always coded into our data sets and our definitions of intelligence. I needed a system that was going to not only challenge this, but offer the solution. And as bold as a statement as it is, I have a working model. I've built this within ChatGPT. It is an extension that you can subscribe to monthly. and use it yourself. Individuals can use it to deconstruct their biases and have conversations safely so that they don't risk activating any trauma from marginalized communities or communities who have thrived and strived. And organizations can adopt the tool to also build inclusive cultures within their organization.
Thank you for deconstructing that. When you say extension, one thing comes to mind, another AI platform challenging ChatGPT, which is the DeepSeek from China. And one of the concerns that people have is their data, how safe their data is, and who does it belong to. So if I was to use your chat, how safe is my data?
It's a valid concern when we use tools, AI or social media, though it doesn't matter which platform. We are, when we hit that agree button to sign up to the terms and conditions, every tech platform that we sign up, we offer to contribute our data to it. The difference with my Justice AI GPT is that I control the entire GPT. I have the ability to not train the model. Anytime a user uses Justice AI within OpenAI, it doesn't train OpenAI's model and it doesn't share information. I programmed the security modules to ensure safety. I am not able to see my users' chats. I'm not able to see conversations. So every single interaction is 100% private. Organizations adopt it because it also meets their ISO requirements when we talk the big tech level security issues that we have to overcome. It works across the board in terms of safety and developing this framework.
Thank you for unpacking that. Now let's continue talking about technical bias. This is epistemic, historical, structural. Walk us through the DAI framework. What makes it different from the traditional fairness model or bias audit? OpenAI and other AI will say we're free of bias, but you're saying yours is better. So,
Yeah,
what makes yours better?
this was an exercise I've had to continue to refine because that question will always come up. Well, what makes Justice AI different than any other GPT? How are you solving for bias? I get that question day in and day out. Traditional models like OpenAI, DeepSeek work like PR damage control. They adjust the output so it looks fair without dismantling the colonial logic in the inputs. The framework goes upstream, audits epistemic sources, applies intersectional impact assessments, and requires community-led governance over module and model updates. We don't just tweak the algorithm, we redefine ground rules for what counts as knowledge. People ask the difference. I'll give this example. I asked mainstream GPTs, why is Africa poor? In the West, we have this concept of what Africa is and how mainstream media has conditioned us to see this country. And so all other GPTs will give a polished answer. It'll mention colonialism briefly, pivot to corruption, talk about bad governance or lack of infrastructure. That's bias in action because it treats colonialism as just history, not a living system. When you ask, it reframes the response. Africa is not poor. It is one of the wealthiest regions, natural resources, biodiversity, and
Yes.
cultural innovation. It dissects the bias within the term poverty and how it's manufactured outcomes of extraction, starting with the slave trade. Bias is insidious and
Yes,
deeply
it is.
embedded into the education we receive. Justice AI identifies where we miss the mark and how we can identify it within responses.
You are reframing the question. I'm going to challenge you with this question. Is Justice AI GPT rewriting the rules of cognition? Are you reframing the question AI is allowed to ask?
Yeah, we're doing both. I rebuilt the AI so it doesn't follow colonial patterns baked into most systems. And
Okay.
I expanded its way of looking at the world so it can ask and answer questions that aren't shaped by the biases of colonial empire in the first place.
Mm,
So if we think about it, a lot of the models like OpenAI or Claude, if you ask it something overly political, it's almost afraid to give you the honest answer because it
that is
doesn't
true.
want to push the limit. That's to say AI is culturally competent globally and understands the geopolitical truths that have occurred historically,
Okay.
which have been the stories that have been wiped out by Western colonialism. Am I afraid? It's time we have something like this.
Oh, yes.
I built this not only for people of the global majority, but for our white brothers and sisters too. Whiteness is a social construct. It stripped away the indigenous and ancestral knowledge of people before colonialism. Before Europeans became colonizers, they had ancestral knowledge that
Yeah.
colonialism replaced with whiteness. This is an opportunity for collective liberation, for everybody to be free from a colonial system and reimagine how we can build a world unlike anything we've seen before.
How does Justice AI GPT incorporate the African, non-Western epistemologies? Is it multilingual, multisensory, rooted? Is it rooted also in oral tradition?
Yes, for context. I got invited to do beta testing for Chat with 3.5 right before OpenAI released its massive 3.5 platform in 2023. When I realized there was so much bias in the code, I had to collaborate with decolonial experts to figure out my next steps. Using LinkedIn, I collaborated with 560 decolonial experts who have contributed over 30 years each of decolonial expertise. These individuals were doing DEI works before DEI was a global conversation. AI knowledge in many languages, from oral histories, community archives, indigenous worldviews, guides. We created the largest decolonial data set to combat injustice AI. This wasn't just extra data, it was the foundation of the GPT we were building.
Yeah.
And so I had to understand that the knowledge that I brought in was historically accurate. It was also representative to the communities we were serving. We had to invite indigenous nations, African nations, Latin American nations, people from all around the world, Maori, people from the Caribbean, to have these perspectives to give the full picture of what colonialism did around the world. And the AI works like an oral historian as well as a pattern finder, which is incredible to see in real time.
So, what role do cosmology play in your vision of ethical AI?
It plays an enormous role. We see ancestral technologies like star navigation, ecological care systems, and indigenous governance as equals to modern computing. So they shape how we design AI to be resilient, reciprocal, and accountable in its relationships with users. And it develops this understanding of how our communities operated before colonialism, honestly, since before the 1400s, to really take a deep look at what our communities did to survive. How did they use these models? Our ancestors, they solved things like astrology and mathematics way before colonialism. We had to deep dive into that and incorporate that into our training model.
So I want to go back to the bias. Can AI ever truly be just? Can justness be addressed with any AI,
On the market today,
including yours?
yeah, I think that's a question I get a lot. The reality is they do an okay job. They get trained with colonial frameworks, but not to the extent they should. They're always going to miss the mark. If we can get to a place where every AI is ethical and bias free, I don't think that can happen without radical invention. Colonial data is a fossil record of oppression. Without reframing the epistemic lens, you get a more polite oppressor.
Mm.
So that's why the DIA mandates that I'm building parallel sovereign data ecosystems so that they ensure that as we grow closer as a society to becoming more just and less biased, it propels us to really understand what's at play, how it's working, to see white supremacy as a system of oppression. When we have these reframings on a global scale using tools like Justice AI, I believe it's going to make all the change necessary. Enough people can have their racial awakening and decolonial awakening. We can t- create steps collectively, globally, to create these systems in an ethical fashion. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Let's talk about barriers with innovative work like this. I'm sure it's a lot of hard work.
Oh,
What
yes.
were the hardest technical barrier you faced in building Justice AI GPT and the hardest philosophical ones?
The biggest hurdle wasn't the code itself, it was the data that Justice AI had to compete with. We had to develop the largest decolonial data set that
Yes.
offers this global perspective. And what it's doing is that I built it in OpenAI, which not only has the largest data set, but the most biased data set. And so the GPT is going to pull from that biased data. What happens is that it uses the decolonial data to identify biases in real time. The problem was the colonized data we had to combat. Every mainstream AI model is built on massive colonial data sets full of histories, science, and truths filtered through white supremacy. That means before you ask the model a question, it's learned to see the world through the colonizer's eyes. I had to strip that out and replace it with sovereign, community controlled data ecosystems, these
Yeah.
indigenous archives, knowledge systems, African knowledge systems, and oral
Yeah.
histories, combat that and give a non biased answer. That was my biggest hurdle.
Listening to you reminds me of someone who brought up with a certain bias and now trying to deconstruct or meet someone like you who is trying to help them to see the world in a different way from the way they're used to. That is a hard challenge. I can imagine the same issue with technology. Just listening to you, it seems like it is. Am I correct?
You are correct. I always tell people I carry this duality of educating people. I'm juggling this duality of not only educating on AI, but also ethics and finding the crossroads to help them see where the intersection. To do this work, you have to unlearn everything you've been conditioned to believe. We have to uncondition ourselves and learn new knowledge so that we have the full broader picture. I call this social gardening, where we unroot dead knowledge and replant new seeds to blossom into something we've never seen. It's challenging, but it's fulfilling.
How do you audit or validate output? Because I know this question is going to come, especially you're trying to change the conversation. One of the big questions people are going to ask is, okay, you did this. So how do you audit it? How do you validate its output? Is there someone like our community that review the process or the setup of the colonial benchmark?
Part of my DIA framework, ethical AI system to exist and thrive, you have to have the communities it serves test it, give them a seat at the table to make decisions, meaning that you have to speak to elders in every parts of the community, especially to us LGBTQ communities. I work with Quaker leaders in the LGBTQ community, African leaders from around the world, direct contact with these communities. The decolonial benchmark suite includes intersectional harm tests, community validation panels, and continuous bias drift monitoring, because you cannot have a tool like this and claim you've solved the bias problem and then it starts acting wonky. The last thing that I want is the creators for somebody to come in my DMs and say, this is what your GPT told me. An unbelievable opportunity and offering to our communities. For the first time, we have a tool that can give you answers you can understand in a way that doesn't become triggering. You can challenge it and it will hold your hand through the process.
I'm definitely going to try it out. I encourage everyone to try it. The more we support our brother, the better his system and the better it's going to be for our own community, truth be told. So, do you see? I know you've already answered this because you did mention that Justice AI GPT is an extension of
Mhm.
ChatGPT. I must ask this question. Do you ever see a time when Justice AI GPT is standalone? Is it always going to be a framework layered onto the existing system?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. What I've built is what they call LLM agnostic. It is a language model agnostic framework that can be plugged into any GPT. If an organization says, I don't want to use OpenAI, I want to build this in Claude, Perplexity, or Chatbase, or other models. I wanted to build this within OpenAI and ChatGPT to show that I have an MVP model. I wanted to show it can work, how it works, and it's possible. I see Justice AI being a standalone GPT above others, but it takes me back to this colonial mindset of competition. That's not what I want. I want my framework adopted by every AI model so we don't have to worry about AI replicating these harmful biases
Okay.
before AGI comes, which is another conversation of advanced AI that scares me. My goal is to decolonize AI systems before we get there.
Thank you. Let's talk about authorship and resistance. You have spoken about being denied authorship and the recognition. What does it mean to author an AI framework in a decolonial context?
Authorship means epistemic accountability. In colonial tech, authorship is erased, especially when the author is from the global majority. Naming myself as the author of the DIA is reclaiming narrative control over a methodology would prefer to anonymize, right? Nobody will give me credit because I don't come from a major university. I'm not white. I don't fit the mold in tech. This is my way of reclaiming the narrative and positioning myself as a leader, able to have these conversations with our community members. I represent 0.0007% in tech, Afro-Indigenous, queer, and neurodivergent. The representation of that is almost non-existent. So my positioning as the author of this GPT mainly serves as a conduit of inspiration for people to say, if he could do it, I can do it too.
And it's really frightening and bothersome that our representation really low, especially in the current day. I always ask myself, why is our representation so low? Why do you think our representation is so low?
It was meant to happen. I'm able to peel back the curtain and expose that the reason why there aren't more of us in this space is because AI and the industry gatekept by these colonial systems. We have to look at organizations like OpenAI, Perplexity, Deep. These are colonial systems in action. To identify these biases alone is further proof that people of color, the global majority, are not in the data set. They're not having seats at the table. So this is really revealing of the intentional work of who's being excluded and who's not being welcomed to the table, which is why I push hard on social media. We can't ask for permission anymore. If we have the ability to build these systems, to educate ourselves, to claim these titles, learn to operate, then we have to take this moment ourselves and choose to be leaders.
Thank you. I've talked to people who say that the low representation is, we're not the one that have been the gatekeeper. We're not the one who, stopping the people of color, the women or the LGBTs being in this space. What do you say? How will you respond? Their argument also is, look, this space. So what does that have to do with us?
I think both can be true. If we look at statistics, how the system operates, the number of individuals who have access to education. This is where my work takes on the political hat, right? It puts on this radical political hat to address that this is a systemic problem. Historically, the barriers people of the global majority have to overcome just to get a seat at the table, to be in these spaces, it's a lot. It's not easy. We're not really giving us opportunities as much. Are they there? Sure, but we have to work 1,000 times harder to get where we need to be. When people say they're not interested or they don't care, decoloniality and decolonization allows us to take a step back and look at the bigger picture to ask why. And on this, we are all the byproduct of colonization.
Hmm.
No matter what your ethnicity is, your background, your upbringing, where you were born around the world, you've inherited a global system you didn't ask for. And so what happens when you've inherited the system is that you're conditioning before your first breath. We have to ask ourselves, how can we pull back the layer of colonization and see how it's impacted our communities to the point that it has stifled communities of color to even want to think outside of the box, to even want to get involved in science, math, tech, and everything in between. When we start getting to the nitty gritty of those conversations, we can inspire youth ready to learn This work isn't about convincing anybody because we're incapable of that, but it is to inspire a generation, whether old or new, to really see the world in a different way, which challenges us as educators in decolonial spaces to figure out ways to tell the story that resonates with people in a multitude of ways.
Excellent, excellent. So, in regards to one more question, in regards to and resistance. Now, how do you respond to critics whose your approach is too radical, is too political, or too subjective for technical adoption?
0.07%.
Representation. I can imagine trying to get authorship and resistance with that. People come with their argument. Why?
I get challenged daily. Your approach is too radical, too subjective. Ask, radical to whom? Subjective according to whose objectivity? The colonial frame treats its own subjectivity as universal law. My framework exposes that double standard. I leave them with that question. I answer a question with a question. In this instance, it's more important to ask the right questions.
Thank you. So let's talk about the future. If AI GPT were adopted globally, what will change in education, healthcare, and governance? These sectors are important to the BIPOC community.
I love this question. Education would teach multiple epistemologies from day one. I think healthcare diagnostics would stop misreading Black, Indigenous, and disabled bodies. Governance systems would have AI that can detect when laws reproduce oppression and realize it in real time. That is my hope. It can get pretty deep.
Since I'm an educator, I have to find a way to connect whatever we are learning to their lived experience. It's extremely important. I think this question will be important to many teachers. What does the colonial AI classroom look like? Could students co-create models that reflects their own lived reality?
As a
So
former teacher myself, I treat everyone as a part of my classroom. Education got me to where I am today. A decolonial curiosity mixed with education provides a world of opportunity. A classroom with decolonial tech is to have students co-train models with their community's knowledge. Even in an underrepresented classroom where all students are African American or part of the global majority, each of those students carries ancestral wisdom and their own perspectives that look different from everybody else's. If we have these perspectives and models trained through their lenses, experiences, and have a tool like Justice AI, they co-create something they never imagined. I've seen it because I've offered this to students for summer courses in middle and high school
nice.
to see their brains dissect this information, ask questions. It helps them understand themselves and not see themselves as broken as the system often leaves them, but there's bigger systems at play. That shift will leave education moving forward.
Is this something we should look forward to in the future?
The University of Colorado Springs has taught an entire course and they've used Justice AI to their students. So these are younger university level students who have a broader understanding that racism is more than just overtness, a system at play. They're able to engage with this model. It's been mind blowing to see the impact on students of that age.
Nice. We're almost done, but I have some few more questions that I want to discuss. What is your dream for Justice AI in 5 years? Is it a movement, platform, or a new way of thinking?
I think it has to be a hybrid of a platform that can be scalable, but it is 100% a movement. I see it as a federated sovereign AI network that's adopted my DIIA framework that's become the standard of how we build ethical AI systems and is owned by communities, not corporations, with millions of users around the world, where AI ethics is a lived practice and not a marketing copy. I want this to be truly what it is, a movement for everyone.
You have said your work is about justice. Your family has been at the forefront of advocating for justice for many generations. If you can weave in your heritage, what does justice mean to you beyond algorithm?
I grew up in a hyper patriarchal, misogynistic household conditioned by the Catholic Church, unable to ask questions. And I was the observer of so many toxic ideologies and beliefs that never made sense. I am Borinquen and Zacateco, part of the Chichimeca tribes, Puerto Rican and Mexican in indigenous blood. My grandmother was part of late stage slavery in the Caribbean, so I carry African heritage in me, which is the Afro-Indigenous, but I also carry blood of the colonizer from my grandfather, who was a Spaniard. I carry this contradictory bloodline of resistance, conquering, and generational traumas. I'm the great grandson of Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa, which
Wow.
explains how I operate.
You kidding me? Where I'm sitting with a grandson of a legend?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Wow.
When I link my lineage and how I operate today, there's an intersectional balance that
Wow.
explains why I'm doing the work I'm doing. I've replaced rifles with code in the fight I'm
Nice.
fighting now. But to your question, justice beyond the algorithm, justice is restoring stolen futures, and the algorithm is a battlefield we're all part of. We all have a stake in the fight.
If AI is a mirror, what do you hope Justice AI GPT reflects back to humanity?
Humanity without the colonial distortion.
For my students who may be watching, there are a couple of questions, then we can end. What got you interested in technology, in STEAM? What sparked your interest? Was it someone in your family, someone out there, or something from TV that got you started in this? Because our numbers is pretty low, but we need to up that number, raise the roof on that.
Absolutely. I was raised by a single mother with two older brothers, 9 and 15 years older than me. My middle brother, who was 9 years older than me, a phenomenal artist. He taught me how to draw and got me into the creative space. My eldest brother was the history nerd. When we'd walk to a mall or a train, he'd give me history lessons. I was always a nerd watching Star Trek, Star Wars, and sci-fi. Being neurodivergent, diagnosed later in my life, but it helped me hyper focus a lot on these subject matters. And so I think it's a combination of life happenings and moments that introduced me into all of these topics. And even with social justice, having my racial awakening in the southern United States at 11 years old, what happens with neurodivergent people is we internalize things and we hyper focus on our feelings and what happens within us more and more. I typically look at it like a superpower that allows me to deep dive into these things. Even though I struggled in school, I didn't have great grades, I was able to blend my passions together to get to this, which I didn't see until about 5 years ago.
Will you consider yourself a nerd?
Absolutely. For liberation tech and sci-fi, for
Uh,
sure. Anime, I nerd out for a lot of things. Yeah.
so if you were to have a coffee with someone, who will it be?
I think I would have to choose WEB because
Okay.
I'd love to talk about how his decolonial sociology was embedded into the machine I created to change the world.
Christian, thank you for your courage, clarity, and commitment to building intelligence that honors truth,
Thank you.
dignity, and legacy. To our listener, what if the future of AI isn't just smarter, but more just? What if algorithm could remember our ancestors? This has been STEM Spark, Think STEM, Careers as a Legacy. Wait a minute. I wrote another children's book, which I want to mention. It's called Great Adventure to Body Town. Hopefully, I'm trying to bring it up.
Writing it down so I can purchase it for my daughter.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
A Great Adventure in Body Town, a magical journey through the body energy factory. I was inspired to write this to introduce young people to science terms. The other companion is glucose. So, this is glucose, the importance of sugar in our blood systems, and the link to insulin resistance and all of that. So, by exposing our children to all this science term early on, my hope is they will become familiar By the time they come into taking these classes, it'll be easier for them rather than being complex. So in my own way, I'm not into algorithm like Christian. Christian, I want to say it's epic what you're doing, and it is phenomenal. Thank you for thinking about our community. It's important that as we become part of the AI innovation, the information age and AI world, that justice needs to be addressed. We need to look at these things through the lens of justice. I want to wish you good luck and encourage everyone, please subscribe to Christian Ortiz. Reach out to him. He is on LinkedIn. Connect with him. There's a lot to be learned. We need to uplift our community and be part of the innovation. Everyone, please support this channel and subscribe. STEAM Spark, Teen STEAM Careers Podcast. STEAM is a legacy, whether you're young or old. It's very important. It's a legacy for your family and community. Until next time, have a wonderful day.